Welcome, everybody. You are now tuned in to Muse News, the show where we talk about all things MUN and beyond. Today in the CHMR studio, we're joined with Nicolas Keough. He is the Director of External Affairs at MUN Students Union. We're here with Bill Kavanagh. He's the President of CUPE Local 1615. We're here with Lisa Moores, who is the External Affairs at VP External Affairs at MUNFA, MUN's Faculty Association, and together they're all part of the Campus Coalition, which is a group of student and labor unions that are put together for a campaign called Fund MUN. So I'm your host, John Harris. Welcome everybody to the studio.
Thanks for having us, John.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So last night or yesterday evening, the news broke of the Auditor General's report on MUN campus facilities management. What do you make of the report? Let's start with Nick with the Students' Union.
Yeah, so the Auditor General actually, not yesterday but the day before, asked me to meet with her, and so we had a meeting directly before the announcement came out, and she told me that she was really frustrated with the administration and the fact that they seemingly hadn't implemented the recommendations from the 2014 report. And yeah, I think it was really not shocking at all to a lot of students, but the actual amount and the numbers is what really floored me. The specifics that we were able to see and just how bad it is on an internal level at Memorial Administration specifically. We definitely knew that there were problems. We see them every day, but to see the inner workings and to see what was really wrong was shocking.
And what about you, Bill?
Yeah, I would say to a large degree, I think our member groups and unions, as well as the members in those unions, are not surprised to see a lot what was in that report. In fact, if you look at the Coalition's Fund MUN campaign, you will see participants of Share Your Story, where you will see many pictures of the state of disrepair of the campuses. So I think there was no surprise. Just in terms of broad strokes, I don't think anybody in the coalition would push back against scrutiny, whether about spending, whether it come from the Auditor General, our coalition members, or the general public. We think that's important. And it's interesting that report has come out because, and I'm sure we'll get into this as we talk, the coalition has been lobbying the government to properly fund this place. Yes, the Fund MUN campaign. And that is a message, a campaign directed at the Premier and the government. That's been ongoing well before this report. The ask is to fund the university. And if there are questions about how the money is being spent, that is sent from government to the university, and if those need to be addressed, so be it. But the Coalition and the Fund MUN campaign is focusing on a root cause of all of our communal problems as student unions and labor unions, which is fund the university. And we can talk more, but we've invited the Premier and the Minister to meetings. Those are not coming to fruition, and we're still waiting.
And Lisa, what do you make of the report?
Yeah, well, I think as my colleagues have said, not surprising, and in many ways probably predictable. So it is good to have a tabulation, as these folks said, of the effects, and to see that all listed there. It's really important to have that level of scrutiny, and an audit is meant to entail lists that has a lot of detail in it, and it's important for us to have that. It tells us a lot about the effects of 10 years of cuts. Doesn't tell us too much about the causes, but that's not really the point of an audit, right? But I think that's the next step, is really taking that information and putting it in context that helps us understand what's needed in terms of solutions. How do we get to where we need to get with all of this information in mind? But as Bill said, we certainly appreciate and see the need for a level of accountability when it comes to spending. This is public university, right? Public funds there. So that's an important step.
So according to the report, we're looking at almost $500 million of deferred maintenance. And like Lisa pointed out, the audit isn't really meant to find out the causes, but to just know what the situation is. What would you say is the cause of this almost $500 million of deferred maintenance, which means maintenance that is not that needs to be done to the university and the campus, but has not been budgeted. What do you make of the root causes of how we got to this situation at Memorial? I'll start with Nick.
I think it is the majority of these issues are caused by a lack of funding. So we've seen consecutive years, for 11 years in a row, we've seen cuts every single year to Memorial, to the operating budget. When you factor in inflation and exclude the School of Medicine, we've seen a 52% cut since 2013. So that's obviously really, really big. And it is very difficult for a university of this size to run on such a drastic budget cut. However, obviously, as the audit has said, there are issues within the university, within governance, about actively using the funds that they have to address these problems. We've seen the campus renewal fee fund not necessarily be used for what it should be used for, and that's definitely concerning. But I also think that with the lack of funding that we've seen from the provincial government, it was impossible for them to fix the issues that have occurred.
And just to build on that, what are examples of the deferred maintenance that you're seeing around campus?
Tunnels. We see leaks in the tunnels all the time. We see ceiling tiles. I know there was a ceiling tile that fell during a final exam at the Blenheim Center last semester. There was a ceiling tile that fell during midterm in the social work building. There was a ceiling tile that fell in the disc office and hit a student. There have been concerns raised about asbestos. There's been concerns raised about water quality at residents. There's been concerns raised about rat infestations at residents. The list honestly goes on, and we see it. You can't go far without seeing it at MUN.
And Bill, what would your perspective be on how it's gotten to this point? How have there been so much deferred maintenance?
Well, the first thing, and I do think it's important for your viewing and listening audience to understand the process about how this place is funded. Each fiscal year, the government brings to the House of Assembly an approval for what's called the estimates. So the estimates process lays out by department and government agencies and so on what amount will be sent to those institutions. So there's a line item for Memorial University operating grant, and as Nicolas has mentioned, that's been cut over the years. And while I think there's an appetite to hear about this more now given the report, this coalition and the Fund MUN campaign has already been talking about that for several months now. So it's not a surprise. So literally the decrease in funding through the operating grant is literally where some of that money is going. I'll be transparent and say I'm not exactly sure the culture or the change that happened where these maintenance needs were literally deferred, but the figure is $481 million. The university itself doesn't deny that. They use the same number. So I think getting to the answer of your question, which I don't have the exact answer, but I do think there's a real importance for the government to help us see how that happened, how it can be fixed, and ultimately, again, going back to Fund MUN campaign, as we figure out exactly how it went wrong and prevent that from happening in the future, the university needs to be funded.
So take us back to September, and what was your message for Premier Furey?
So we started in September. We noticed that it was nearing 500 days. And so in September, it was 500 days since the Premier had committed to sitting down with stakeholders and reconsidering funding to the university. And so we made a public call out asking for a meeting, and then we received a meeting with the NDP and the PCs, and we did not receive any response at all from the Premier's office. And in December, it hit 600 days. We did the same thing, and we did not receive a response. And on December 11th, we noticed that in the media he had said he was going to, or a minister was going to, reach out to MUNSU and MUNFA to schedule a meeting, and we haven't seen that. It's now been over a month. So I don't think we're seeing the accountability that we want to see from the Premier. He's pretty much refusing to listen to the stakeholders who are impacted the most by these cuts, and it seems as though he's trying to bury his head in the sand and act as though these problems are completely on Memorial and completely on administration, while they are absolutely partially on the administration of the university, it was impossible for this not to be a problem with a 50% funding cut over a decade. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that he has committed to ignoring students, ignoring staff at this university is really concerning. And I think that he will likely regret that when it comes time for a provincial election.
And Bill, what do you make of the response from provincial government, from the campus coalition so far?
Yeah, and so the asks to the Premier for a meeting predate the active form of the coalition. It goes back to MUNSU. But I think it's really important to note that now, as an entire coalition, a coalition of all of the labour unions, academic and non-academic, all of the student unions. You got CUPE 1615, there's other CUPE locals, there's NAPE locals, there's the lecturers union, there's the teaching union, there's the MUNSU, the St. John's Campus students union, there's the Grenfell Campus student union. So this is an ask now by this whole coalition, which I think is fair to say represents the university community. And to not hear back is I think a disservice to the special mandate of this university and to the people of the province. And the other thing that I think is significant to note about our request to the Premier to meet as a coalition, we're also taking stock and being very clear that we are not just looking after our composite unions and our members, we are trying to take care to make sure the special mandate of this university is upheld, and that's a mandate to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. And so it is significant that the Premier has not responded. Sure, if the Premier, if there's public scrutiny coming about budgeting or, the report from the Auditor General, I don't think anybody in our coalition would not welcome scrutiny and proper budgeting. However, we need to hear back from the Premier about properly funding this university. And the other thing I'll say, too, as it pertains to the people of Newfoundland and Labrador and the campus the university community, which is actually beyond the citizens of the province as well, over 66,000 graduates of this university live and work here and make this province run. So this is significant, and I think the public should pay attention, and they should take note that the Premier of the province has not gotten back to us. And as was mentioned, we gotten wind from the media, not directly, that the Premier had said, I think a minister or ministers will be in touch. It's now 2025, and we haven't heard back.
And Lisa, what is your members' response to the lack of response from the provincial government?
Well, it's discouraging, right? And it doesn't quite feel respectful, for sure. If there's a desire to be collecting information and ensuring it's valid information, talk to the people whose boots are on the ground here every day. We're the ones that can actually, give you the information about how these cuts have impacted and how things are running. And would be more than happy, I'm sure, to be pretty frank about that, right? But in reality, as Bill said, I mean, we're not just talking about the 20,000 people who are represented by this campus coalition, which is already a very large number. When we add in, I think that's a 2021 number in terms of those 66,000. We're above that already now. That's all voters there. You don't have to, it's not a choice between feeling it's very important to have accountability, especially fiduciary responsibility, accountability about how you're spending precious dollars. We get that. We understand very much that each time where expenditures are being made here, they need to be considered very carefully because there isn't a lot of funds to go around right now. You don't have to choose between believing that that's really important and believing that having a public comprehensive university in this province for the people of this province is also important. We believe both of those things, and we think that most Newfoundlanders and Labradorians probably agree. But we're at the point right now where when you are on the ground, you feel when you're hitting that tipping point, like a point of no return, where the cost of trying to rebuild when you go so far becomes really hard to imagine how that would be. The reason this coalition exists is because everybody on the ground in this community has felt us nearing that tipping point. That's where we are right now. And, it doesn't feel good to feel like this generation of students and the next one are going to be getting less than what those of us who benefited from having a public university in our own province got. I did an undergraduate degree here. I know what it was like to be able to go through your education and know that Memorial was there as a high quality and accessible post-secondary institution. That is the legacy. That is the legacy of this living memorial, is to ensure that for that lost generation, you make something better and you provide opportunity and potential to every single generation who comes after it. For those of us in this community, that means something to us. It always has. And we're now at the point where I can't reasonably say that our current students are getting what I got here, 25 or more years ago. We are definitely seeing a dilution of that education, but it also, brings up the question of, we're wondering, is this provincial government recognizing that when it comes to Memorial University, the legacy that's forming right now for this government in terms of this institution is, leaving it a fraction of what it was before, and a shadow of the potential of what it could mean and could be for the people of this province. That's why this is important. We can't go from a comprehensive university to a polytechnic. We don't have numerous other universities just across town. When we start, really cutting and carving away, the people who lose here are going to be the people of this province, right? Not having the opportunity to have your children do their post-secondary studies in your own province and hopefully stay in this province and contribute to it. We've seen this before. We've been here before, right? We've already seen the out-migration, what happens when those folks, young people, leave and don't return here. That's where we're at right now. So this is why you'll see that we've stayed very much on message in this coalition. We haven't spoken to just our individual mandates as unions, whether they're student unions or labor unions, because this is more important than that. It's something bigger than that, and that's why we feel so strongly and so passionately about it. It's not our job, really, to advocate directly to government for, appropriate funding of the only public university. But that's it. Someone has to do that, and we're willing to do that, right? We're willing to take that chance, and we're willing to try to, find the courage to be able to do that again and again. That's where we are right now, and we'd really ask for that to be respected, because we're not just representing ourselves or a small fraction of people. We're representing tens of thousands of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians.
And Nick, it's been a couple years since the tuition at Memorial for undergrad students has increased. What do you make of that change in culture from the 20-year-long tuition freeze at Memorial to when we've seen the doubling of tuition?
I think it just shows that the provincial government is not serious about investing in education and is not serious about investing in the quality of education that students can have in this province and the future of the province as a whole. We've already seen an extreme drop in enrollment every single year since the tuition hike was implemented, and that's in no small part due to the funding cuts. We see that as a direct result. Enrollment was actually going up until these cuts happened 3 years ago, and now it's gone down every single year. So we know that is absolutely part of it, but it does signify a larger issue of funding being stripped from this university every single year. And to see us not have the low tuition that we used to have, and then also the walls are crumbling around us, it's just everything piling on top of each other. It's really difficult to envision a future for the university as a student.
And what do you make of the current situation on the campus infrastructure, and what is the student experience like going around?
The student experience it's really demoralizing to see everything that's happening, to see walls falling down, to see leaks everywhere, buckets randomly in the middle of the hallway. It's really frustrating, especially when we're trying to be proud of our province, we're trying to be proud of our university, and it's the 100th year of this university, and we can't be proud of that because we see all this disrepair, And it doesn't make us feel excited to go to school at all. It makes us really embarrassed of this university. It makes us just begrudgingly getting through our courses to get the degree and get out. And it doesn't make us want to stay in the province either.
And so the Auditor General's report points out that there's $481 million of deferred maintenance. How do you think it's gotten to this point, and where do you see that deferred maintenance most obvious?
I see the deferred maintenance most obvious in the tunnels. I see it in the ceiling tiles that are falling down. We've seen multiple ceiling tiles fall down during exams for students, disrupting their learning. We've seen a ceiling tile actually fall on a student. And so these things are just absolutely ridiculous. We see safety concerns, we see actual injuries, and we're worried about asbestos, we're worried about everything. And in the AG report, it was really interesting to see that there were 6 buildings on this campus in St. John's that were considered to be in critical condition. And there's a facility condition index, which basically states how bad things are at each different facility. The level for a critical facility condition index is 30%. So above 30%, it's considered critical. The math building right now at this university is at 52%. So just, I can't even imagine 22% above what is considered critical. So I just, when we talk about the point of no return, it really feels like it's approaching very, very soon, and the provincial government needs to step in and change their ways immediately, fund the university, and speak to stakeholders.
And Bill, what is your perspective on the deferred maintenance?
Yeah, it does appear like it's a situation critical. $481 million for the mathematicians out there is almost $500 million, and it's literally deferred maintenance. So, and I don't historically know how the culture changes or how that number accumulated over time exactly, but that's where we are. And it's no secret if you're a person who comes to any of these campuses. I spend most of my time on St. John's campus. It's immediately apparent that the buildings are in significant disrepair, and a lot of the this is why we're a coalition. From the student perspective, that's their learning environment, and also for many of them, it's also their living environment. You have people who live in residence are going through those tunnels, right, in the evening or to go get food or whatever. So it's their living environment. From the staffing perspective, both academic and non-academic, this is our working environment, right? So it is discouraging. It's easy to see. And like I was saying earlier, while that is a significant problem in and of itself, it's also symbolic of the state of the institution, labor-wise, curriculum-wise, services to students-wise. So, and I will say too, I don't think members of the coalition would disagree or push back against scrutiny, some we're seeing from the Auditor General, right? But we think, but that's also a thing that this coalition was already talking about. This coalition, one thing we hadn't mentioned to you is we had a press conference in the fall as well. We mentioned that $481 million figure. And while, look, we're all about whether it's the government initiated or the Auditor General or the administration itself, if there's room for better oversight and improvement and budgeting and so on, so be it. That's good. But the funding needs to come, and we haven't heard back from the Premier on that.
And Lisa, what's your perspective? How did it get this high, and what is its effect on your members?
Well, I think when we look at this campus, we see the picture of an institution in crisis, really. That we're seeing the consequences of, not just really extensive, but also really rapid cuts, and ones that I think don't feel to those of us on the ground as being really well thought out, right? So we agree that a plan is needed, and that information that was provided, I think, is probably pretty essential to that kind of a plan. But at the end of the day, you can't spend what you don't have. Newfoundland, we talk about, like, are we going to pay buttons or beat trucks here, right? We've got to be able to have funds to address these problems. So it's time to start dealing with reality and start talking about solutions. And this community is looking to, both administration, but also the provincial government for true leadership here, right? When are we going to start talking about the reality of how we're going to figure out what the realistic and reasonable cost of running a comprehensive public university to the benefit of the people of the province is? That's the number that we have to start with, not with just where you hope to be, how it compares to other provinces that are in very different situations and contexts. We need to start working with reality, and we need to start moving beyond only looking at the effects and the consequences, and start looking at the causes and addressing those causes. So I think that's what our members are looking to see, and in a lot of ways the infrastructure probably is, one of the places where you can see a good reflection of that. But at the same time, where are the solutions going to be coming from here? What are the next steps? So this information, now what? That's what I think our members want to know, and we're looking for accountability on all fronts in order to figure out how to get there. We want a plan, and we want one that has the benefit and the needs of the people of this province front and center.
And Nick, what do you make of the government saying that they, or government or anybody in defense of the cuts, saying that the economic situation of the province doesn't allow for funding of Memorial University at the level that it was?
If you don't fund education, then you don't have a province. At the end of the day, we've seen the positive economic impacts of post-secondary education in this province, whether it be at CNA or at MUN. We've seen exactly how that's positively impacted the province and allowed us to retain some of our skilled workers. It's not going to be the same if we don't have a university. And I think what's really important as well is recognizing that the Premier is partially responsible for the finances of the university. He does directly select the chair of the Board of Regents, which is the financial decision-making body of the university, and he holds more than 50% of the seats on this Board of Regents. So when we're talking about financial accountability and we're talking about financial transparency, why are we not talking about the Premier and the cuts that he's made to the university and what the Board of Regents has decided to do with that money? Because it all really does come back to the provincial government and their misspending. I think that it's really easy for Premier Fury to pass the buck onto administration. It's extremely easy for him to do that, especially with all these reports coming out, because he's right. The administration has been mismanaging the money that they have. However, he is part of that administration because he selects over half of the Board of Regents. You can't get away from that. You can't just say it's an independent institution and then select over half of the financial decision-making body of that institution. You just can't do that. So to see this finger pointing and this blame game is absolutely ridiculous, at the same time as he's ignoring the stakeholders, refusing to listen. If he actually cared about, if it was, money is scarce and we can't fund this university, he would meet with us. He would listen to us, but he doesn't want to listen to us because he knows that we're right. To be honest, he knows that we're right. He knows that we know this situation more than him because we live it every day, and he does not want to hear it because it is indefensible what he has done to this university. It's indefensible what the Liberal government has done over the last decade to this university, and he knows that he cannot come out and defend it to us, and he can't actually defend it to the media.
And Bill, what is your take on the provincial government and their what the logic that they've said that we can't afford to fund Memorial?
Well, my first response will, and it's not a line, but it's an investment. Running a quality public institution that is Memorial University has its returns. We're quoting the figure, which is old now, it's probably larger, over 66,000 graduates live and work here. And if you look back in the day historically, and we've seen this in some ceremonies, some figures have been talking about the history of the university. And back in the day when elected officials were debating whether this institution would be created and funded, when in wartime, when we were sending folks to war, and so, some members of the House of Assembly back then were debating whether, no, I think we should spend this on healthcare and hospitals or schools. And the folks at the time said, maybe there's room for investment there too, but we can't have doctors who can be quality doctors in our hospitals or quality teachers in our schools if we don't have a public institution here. The majority of our folks live on the island portion of the province. It's not easy for folks to afford to go away to other provinces and other institutions to basically help us educate ourselves and train ourselves so we can, fill the occupations that run this province. So it's an investment. So, and I do want to comment too, we happen to be talking about this now where there's other big news about a tentative agreement, a hydro agreement, where I believe the Premier is now using language like everything is different now. I hope that he sees that and first of all agrees to meet with us. We wouldn't have to be referring to the Premier in the third person if the Premier agreed to meet with us. Right? We're a coalition that represents thousands of the university community, and we're actually also trying to, as Lisa said, represent and look at the interests of the people of this province. So it's an investment that needs to be funded. If the Premier or the government wants to talk to us about how to problem solve it, if there are some challenges to fund it, please come talk to us. There's smart folks involved with this coalition. So that would be my response to the Premier. And if the Premier is seeing challenges in properly funding this institution, please come talk to us because we can help figure out how to do that. It's important and it's an investment.
So the Memorial University looms large in the public imagination of the province and political imagination as well. What do you think has happened in terms of the culture of the provincial government that has led to a defunding of the university?
Well, of course, we're not privy to interactions between senior administration and the provincial government, but we know from living through the last several years that there have been a lot of difficult situations, and a lot of change in terms of leadership, and right now a lot of kind of interim and temporary folks that are in there. I think we can probably glean from that the provincial government has its own feelings about the crises and the scandals and the things that have impacted Memorial. What we're saying is, should that be held against those of us who are making up this university community, right? We're not a part of those relationships, but the relationship has to extend beyond that. What I would say is it's not really a question about can we afford to fund Memorial University? The question really is, can we afford not to fund Memorial University? We have, let's tick them off. We have shortages of physicians. We have shortages of nurses. We have shortages of social workers, difficulty, recruiting teachers in lots of places, psychologists. We have a long list of, different professions that we have shortages in Newfoundland that have a real daily impact on every Newfoundlander and Labradorian. Who trains those people? We do. We train them, and we train them very well. We trained Premier Fury himself. So we know that we provide quality education and that our alumni feel really good about the education they've gotten here. We can't afford not to be providing that level of education, not as a province like ours, not as, a largely, disconnected from a lot of the rest of Canada in terms of just geography. We've got to be realistic about that. Even physicians, it's one thing to say, okay, well, Faculty of Medicine is funded differently. Those folks have to do undergraduate degrees as well, right? Who trains them? And if they go somewhere else to do that undergraduate work, are they going to come back to serve us? No, we know that, in some cases people will, but it's not reliable. The best way to hold on to highly trained and qualified professionals, whether it's in health professions or other places, is to train them here, because that's the thing most likely to keep them here. So, if we're going to be in a next generation where, those of us who have children who are post-secondary or secondary school age right now, I don't want to have to say goodbye to those folks strictly because the education they want to have is not accessible here. It's one thing to make a choice to go elsewhere. This is the reality where we are, and I think all of the people in this province have to start thinking long and hard about that. And recognize, it's not a matter of choosing between wanting to ensure that Memorial is acting really responsibly with our taxpayer dollars. It's our dollars as well. We want that very much. But don't have the entire public university system here suffer because of that, right? It's time to look beyond that and really show some leadership to stand up for the people of this province and the next generation. They should not have less opportunity and less choice than the previous generation before. That's not good enough, and we're really not okay with settling for that. And we don't think that should be good enough for this provincial government either. It needs to start thinking about Memorial University as a solution to a lot of its problems, because it is, and not just holding the line that it is the problem around it. These problems are solvable, but if you take that out of the mix, all of the other issues that we're a key factor in are going to be much more difficult to solve. This is not an investment that doesn't have a return. This is not somewhere, it's a corporation going to take and then it's going to go with the payday. This is here, right? When you're putting money into a public university, and there's lots of, clear information and financial reports that show all of that money and then more comes back to this province. So when we make those cuts, we do it at our own peril.
And what do you make of the statement that came from December during exam seasons that MUN was downsizing?
Mm-hmm. I think that's concerning. It makes me wonder who loses in that scenario, right? Because there of course are some families and folks and people who have privilege to be able to pursue a post-secondary education in a lot of different places, and that's good. But there are also a lot of people who really rely on having that education be accessible in their own province, and if it isn't, that will foreclose that option for them. And we're going to see the impact of that. That's maybe your future family doctor who's not actually going to be able to, attend here, right? That's what we're going to lose in that, and we're all the ones who lose in that scenario. So we've really got to get realistic about recognizing the importance of Memorial University just to our average folks in the province, like all of us, right? We're concerned about it from that perspective.
And Nick, what did you make of the statement that came from the president of Memorial University, Neil Bose, during exam season that MUN was no longer hiring any new staff, with exceptions, no longer filling vacant positions with exceptions, and what the final line kind of indicates that the MUN is downsizing?
Well, I said what I feel about his decisions at the Senate meeting in December, but basically I think that he has absolutely abandoned this university. I think he's covering for the provincial government intentionally, and I think that he is refusing to fight for the institution that he's supposed to represent. I have made the point several times to him that Art May in 1998 said specifically publicly that the university should be funded more by the provincial government, and in 1999 we had a tuition freeze. We had the provincial government investing in education. Neil Bose refuses to do that, and we're seeing exactly what's happening. We're seeing AG report after AG report. We're seeing the province not be convinced that the university is a good investment, and it's just because we're not being fought for by the people who are supposed to represent the university. When we have students and faculty and staff at this university who are saying that this is a disaster, this is a crisis, and then we have the administration saying, oh, it's fine, we just have to downsize, it's okay, then the people of the province are going to be confused. It's as if Memorial as an entity is talking out of two sides of its mouth, and people are people just think, oh, well, they don't know what they need. It's a big mess there. We don't have a united front because of the administration and because of the fact that they refuse to fight for this university. They are 100% okay with downsizing. They're 100% okay with higher tuition fees. They're 100% okay with the walls literally crumbling around us. And they say that they're not. They say that they're changing things, but we've seen that in the past 10 years, they haven't changed things. We see that they're still not willing to actively and publicly say the provincial government needs to stop cutting funding from the university and needs to reinvest in the university. And it's really a bare minimum. If you're representing an institution, especially a public institution, especially the only public university in the province, it is your responsibility to advocate for that institution. I honestly, it is baffling to me that this person who is making over $400,000 a year doesn't seem to understand that his job is to advocate for the university.
And what do you think, Bill, of the announcement that there will be no vacancy fillings or new hires?
Well, first I would say, as a coalition member and who's speaking to folks in the university community, including members of my union local, but just the community, people were really stressed about that. Lots of anxiety leading up to the Christmas season, so that's a fact, right? I mean, people were feeling the stress of that. The coalition, again, as I've said, is not objecting to oversight or stringent budgeting and making sure money is used effectively. So if there are changes coming from whatever the source on that front, no objections by the coalition. However, to bring it back, the Fund MUN campaign is about getting at the root cause, which is this place is essentially being defunded. So we're looking to the Premier for leadership. We're also looking to the Premier for a meeting. And we want to talk about if the Premier or the government has some concerns about how they're going to fund this university, or some concerns they have about what mechanisms or what amounts and where it will go. We're very willing to talk about that and be part of finding what the solution is. So, folks were, I think, fairly stressed about that announcement. We're looking at the Fund MUN campaign is looking to government, the Premier, members of the House of Assembly, frankly, but our audience is the general public, and we're asking people to write their MHAs as well. Again, I talked about the estimates process and how they approve funding that's sent here. We're trying to get at that root cause, and so we want to hear from the Premier on that.
And Lisa, what's next for the Fund MUN campaign?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the path forward, I think, is more of the same, because we're clearly not anywhere near, the end result that we want. What we need next is, as my colleagues have said, we need a meeting with the Premier, right? We need to have a discussion about what this memorial community knows about what's needed to make the plans and the decisions that this report and others have said very clearly are needed. These stakeholders need to be a part of that decision-making process. So that's something that we need. And what I will say is we won't stop, right? We are not going to stop. We're going to continue forward with this, because this need is growing every day. We don't have the option to stop. We don't have the luxury of deciding, when enough advocacy is enough. It's enough when we're actually heard and we start to see some results. And that's the path forward for us. We're fully committed, and we're moving forward with that in mind. And, we're speaking on behalf of a lot of folks who in some cases don't feel like they have the voice for that. I can understand in one way with the freeze and other things, desire to be doing something, be reacting and acting in some way, but we need a lot more than that. There's nothing to indicate that we are not going to go through this downsizing process and actually be right back in this very same situation in a handful of years, smaller than ever, with much less to be able to back up our contributions to the province. That's the path forward, right? If we have no clear idea of what's needed to run this place the way it needs to be run, then there's really, nothing to base an actual solid plan on. That's what we need moving forward. We need leadership, and we need respectful discussion and consideration, and that's what we're asking for.
And Nick, what is your, I'll just ask the same question to Nick. What's next for Fund Month?
I think we're looking at a provincial election sometime soon. We're looking at it within 2025, and we're definitely going to be calling on all the parties to actively support the Fund MUN campaign. We will be watching, and we will be casting our votes with funding for the university in mind, because a lot of the other election issues, the MOU, the education crisis, the healthcare crisis, the cost of living crisis, the homelessness crisis, everything really does depend on Memorial University and whether we are able to have a province in the next 20, 30 years. And if we don't have a university, all of these crises are going to get worse. So I think a lot of the time that we're going to be spending is convincing the people of this province that every single thing that we're talking about when we're casting our vote, we also need to be talking about post-secondary education. We need to be talking about Memorial University.
And Bill, what's next for Fund MUN?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly, as a coalition, are still regularly meeting, and I would say it's fair to say that the coalition is essentially focused on Fund MUN. So folks can expect that we will keep that focus. The provincial election was already referenced. Folks seeking office or re-seeking office should not be surprised to have Fund MUN playing a role in this election, engaging with the general public, making the case that you're helping us make here by showing an interest in what we're doing. We will be soliciting the people of the voting electorate of this province to consider the special mandate of this university, the importance of funding it, what outputs we get from having a good institution, the return on investment, how this university also serves to attract people to come here and get educated from the Maritimes, across the country, other countries, and we retain some of those people as trained individuals and help us run our province and be part of our community. So folks should expect to be hearing from the Fund MUN campaign when we do see a provincial election, and of course we will continue to try and lobby decision makers prior to any election, including reaching out again to the Premier to meet with us.
Well, that's it for the Muse News. I'm here joined with Nicolas Keough. He's the Executive Director of External Affairs at MUN Students Union. I'm here with Bill Kavanagh, the President of CUPE Local 1615, and VP External Affairs at MUNFA, Lisa Moores. Thank you very much for joining us, and have a great evening.